Hi, and thank you for joining us for an episode of Ecto, which is basically a show about real life paranormal stories, whether it be ghosts, aliens, whatever. I'm going to be reading some stories. These first two on this show are actually my stories, so hopefully you like them and it doesn't freak you out too bad and make you sleep with the lights on. We'll see. So, hold on just a minute and I will have it up there. Thank you.
KBLP LLC. Check us out on iHeart, Speaker, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify. With the best podcasters in the business. Denise Harris, Chris Stevens, Michelle Auger, Ike Diaz, Desiree Pickett, Anissa Nicole, Cecilia Flores, Lolita Diaz. Sponsored by TBs303.com. We are also looking for new podcasters. Inbox any of our podcasters or me, Ike Diaz, directly on Facebook, and someone will get back with you ASAP.
This first story is called The House. It's basically about a house that was in and out of my life for almost 20 years, and it basically destroyed just about everybody in my family. I guess the story starts in the beginning of 1990. I was 20 years old and a young mother, and we were living in California, and the economy there was just horrible at the time. I mean, even for then, it was just terrible. It was hard to make a living. My dad was a truck driver, and he decided he wanted to manage this truck stop in the middle of the Oklahoma Panhandle, and he had asked me and my sister, to go out there and help him run this truck stop, which we did because, there was just nothing for us at the time. We were in the Mojave Desert, and there was just nothing there at that time. Just nothing. The jobs were scarce, and unless you wanted, something with the military, you really didn't have a good job, you know what I mean? Not enough to really, make rent or whatnot. So we went out there, and we get there, and this place is pretty much a dive, because there was supposed to be a house attached to it and all this stuff, and it just, we got there, and it was just a huge disappointment. It was in this small town. But by this time, we were financially strapped. We were stuck where we were, so we just tried to make the best of it and tried to get some jobs. And my parents still ran that place for a little while, but then my dad eventually just went back out on the road and stopped running it, and the rest of us just, I guess you could say, just got regular jobs. And eventually my parents got their finances back up, and they ended up buying these 3 houses. It was on the corner. There's one on the corner and 2 on the sides. Well, their house was one of the ones on the side, and they let me and my husband at the time rent the big house on the corner, which we found out later used to be a funeral parlor, which is, enough in itself. And the other one my sister lived in for years. Well, my parents' house, right from the beginning, the one they moved into, just seemed to have, the worst luck, you know what I mean? Just things were constantly my mother's health just declined to the point that, she couldn't even walk at one point. Her health was so bad she couldn't even walk from, her kitchen to her bedroom without having to stop in the living room. And she was the type of person, she always kind of had some health problems, but it was never major. Do you know what I mean? And all of a sudden, she got so sick that she couldn't even function. And nobody ever really associated with the house because of the health problems she had, you know what I mean? And I had lived in that house for a little while, too, because my husband decided to join the Navy. And he went off to basic training, and I had lived in that house for a bit. And while I was there, I never really had any issues. You know what I mean? It was just the cutest little house. It was, it was just a tiny house. It was kind of like a leftover from the 70s. It had this big green shag carpet. And for some reason, at some point in time, somebody thought it was a good idea to put carpet in the kitchen and the bathroom, and this carpet was like this bright orange, and it was just, like I said, it's seriously like a leftover from the 70s. But anyways, I had lived there, and I had never experienced anything. Now, my oldest daughter, when she lived there, even as a baby, it looked like she'd be talking to somebody. But babies do that, you know what I mean? Because she did in other places, too, so I never really paid attention, I guess you could say. Well, I ended up moving out of the town for a little while because he was in the Navy, and we ended up in different places, Virginia, Illinois, southern Texas, and he was overseas a lot, and I had ended up moving back with my mother because I just, I was alone, and by this time we had 2 kids, and I was alone for the entire time. You know what I mean? In places I didn't have any friends, family. So my mother said, hey, why don't you move back up here with me and, while he's gone, and that's fine. So I did for a while, and while I was in that house, things just seemed to go from bad to worse. You know what I mean? When he would come home, we would fight. He was off, and he would be like, and this wasn't his personality. I mean, he was always a little, flighty, but he would spend most of our money just on just crazy things like go-karts and you know what I mean, just stuff where I was always broke with these 2 kids, and we were fighting constantly. And again, I never associated with the house. I just figured we grew apart and that's it. Well, we ended up breaking up, and I had met somebody else, and I eventually moved to the state where he was and lived there for almost 10 years, and we were perfectly happy and normal, and everything was, well, I wouldn't say normal, but everything was fine, Meanwhile, my mother and father are still in this house, and my mother's health had got to the point so bad that she left and moved to another state, and she swore there was something in that house, but nobody, my mom always said she saw stuff. We never really paid attention too much. And I had never seen anything in that house and never felt anything. Well, my sister, in the meantime, moves into this house. And while she was living there, she ended up getting sick. She had to have surgery. She hit a tree, broke her leg. Her son was in the car. He was really, he got kind of banged up from the accident and just odd stuff. But it wasn't anything that was unexplainable, because I'm the type of person there's got to be a logical explanation. Even though I've personally seen stuff myself and I've seen stuff my whole life, I still always try to find the most logical explanation first. So the house stayed empty for a little while, and one of my brothers had moved into the house, and while he was there, he had the worst luck, whether it be financially, health-wise, whatever, to the point that he ended up he left the house. Well, the house stayed empty for a few years, and when I was in this other state, my second husband, his daughter was having some problems where we were at, and he thought maybe that if we moved to a smaller town, that her problems would be better. So he heard that this house of my parents was empty, and he thought, well, why don't we buy it, So the first year we bought it, and we went there, and he did a lot of, he wanted to renovate the house. So we went there one year to visit, and he basically banged out closet, ripped up floors, did all these things. But he also wasn't exactly savvy with a hammer, so he did all this destruction to the house, but really didn't know how to fix it. But so it stayed like that for a year, and we finally were able to move there, and we started putting down floors and doing all these things, and on day 1, when we moved into this house, on the very first day, I was in the kitchen laying down flooring, and he was in the bathroom laying down flooring, and I heard him call my name. So I'm like, what the hell? So I go back and say, what do you need? I'm busy. He's like, what are you talking about? I said, you just called my name. He says, no, I didn't. So I'm like, whatever. So I go back and I'm laying out the floor. Pretty soon he comes up. He's like, oh, real funny. I was like, real funny what? He says, going in the hallway calling my name. I said, I wasn't in that hallway. I said, I've been here the whole time. So, of course, neither one of us believed the other. We're thinking we're just, someone's messing around and lying about it, whatever, So, but then I started thinking about what my mom had said about things being in that house. So, I, of course, being me, I'm like talking to the air going, hey, I pretty much live on the premise that you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. So if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to call a priest and come and have your ass exercised. So, well, we didn't have any, activity after that. Nothing for the longest time. But other changes started happening. His daughter, my stepdaughter, started getting more just out of touch and just mean and just worse, way worse than she ever was there. Just constant. Every day it was like a struggle with her, just every single day. I mean, it was to the point where she turned vicious, and him and I were always fighting. I mean, we always had high tempers, but it was never to the point where within an hour we didn't get over it, but there it was like an all day, every day. It was either I was depressed or angry. He was always angry, and it's just, and then he started turning into this paranoid person that everybody was out to get him type thing, and it was just so strange. And then what's even worse is my daughter at the time, she was a senior in high school the second year that we were there, her teacher used to live in that house. His parents sold it to my parents, and he asked my daughter if things still went bumping in the night in that house. So apparently whatever this is had been there for a while. Well, suddenly just started hearing thumping noises, you would hear almost like somebody walking in the living room. You go in there, there's nobody there. Floor's creaking, pounding, you get out there, there's nobody there. And things went from bad to worse. I mean, the fights were horrible. My stepdaughter and I started getting physical altercations. She would attack me. I mean, to the point where it was just crazy. Well, him and I eventually divorced. We just couldn't do it anymore. And he took his daughter and went back to the state he's from. And my daughter had, I had two, but one was already out of the house. But my youngest one just went to college. So that left me alone in the house. And at first it was just I would be laying in the bed and I could feel something on my legs, and you know how you're half asleep, and I just assumed it was my dog or my cat that was there. Well, I started getting sick, really sick. I would get these headaches, these horrible stomach aches, but the second I left that house I felt better. So I just assumed it had to have been something went wrong with the plumbing or the electricity or something, So I had called this maintenance guy, and they came in, they inspected the plumbing, they inspected the electrical, they inspected everything from the insulation, everything. There was nothing. But he had said, this is the strangest thing, when they had gone up in the crawl space, the attic, he said when he went up there, he could have sworn that he saw somebody sitting up there. He said it's scary. Well, let me tell you the story of this. He had gone up there, and within 5 minutes, I hear, oh, and he goes, this is a big guy. He comes flying down the ladder, and I'm like, what's wrong with you? He's like, oh, my eyes are just playing tricks on me. I said, are you okay? He's like, yeah, just give me a minute. So he calls this other guy in, and they both go up there. And that's where they inspected, the insulation and different things like that. And he comes down, and then he finally admitted to me right before they left that when he had gone up there the first time, he thought that he had saw somebody up there. He thought, he had seen somebody just sitting up there, but they, when the other guy got there, the person was gone. And there's only one way in and out of that area. So that kind of freaked me out a little bit. So, of course, there's nothing going on. So, and then eventually, as time went on, my ex wanted the cat. It was his cat. That cat loved him, and and he couldn't take her the first time, so he came and got her, and everything was fine. And then my daughter, the one that was in college, had gotten her own place, and she wanted the dog. She's like, Mom, I really want him. I miss him. Well, not so she had taken the dog. Well, when that happened, things went even from worse to just horrific. I mean, My hair started falling out in clumps. I was sick all the time, throwing up. I would literally take on hours at work. I would work 12-hour shifts every single day just so I didn't have to go home. If there was a snowstorm, I would volunteer to stay the night there because I did not want to go home. It was horrible. I mean, just horrible. And it got to the point where the banging sounds in the living room, it would just go from just like subtle to just boom, boom, boom. Like something was just pounding, like somebody was stomping their feet walking across the floor, you know? And it got to the point where I wasn't scared of it anymore. And I would like yell out, go, "Will you knock it off? I'm trying to sleep," because I work nights, you know? And sometimes it would work. It would just stop. Well, then I started feeling that thing on the bed again. Like I'd be sleeping and I would feel like this pressure on my legs. Well, I couldn't blame it on the animals anymore. There was something there. And one night, I was my night off. I was watching TV in the living room, and when the TV went from like the TV show to the commercial, you know how it goes to black, I could see somebody standing behind me in the screen. I jumped up, I looked back, there's nobody there. But I looked back, I turned off the TV, and I looked at it, and you could see somebody standing there. So I ran out of the house. I mean, ran. But like I said, I'm about a logical explanation. I had also worked like something ridiculous, like 40 days straight, 12-hour shifts. So I just attribute it to the fact that I was tired, that I was just seeing things, you know, anything to explain it. So I had called my sister, who lived in Texas at the time, and I was telling her, you know, I just really need to get out of here because that's, you know, everybody moved. I was basically stuck in a small town in the middle of nowhere by myself. Like, I had nobody. Like, there was no family, no friends, nobody there. Which at one time, my whole family lived there. So I felt lonely, I was getting depressed, I was sick, I was strapped to this house, and I just told her, I have to. So we started making plans for me to go there, to where I could get a job and be able to pay for, you know, half of the rent where she lives and still make the mortgage of this house so I could eventually sell it. Well, one afternoon, it was late afternoon, I was actually off that night, so I just decided I would still sleep during the day and I would just try to catch up on some sleep. So it was late afternoon, headed towards evening, and the pounding started. Boom, 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 out in the living room. So I went jumping up, I went there and I opened the door and I said, "Look, you," and I looked and there was this thing. It looked about 4 feet tall, and it was totally black. It almost looked like, you know, like when it says, like, children crossing signs, you know, the yellow signs that have, like, the little black figures. It kind of looked like that in a way. And I stopped, and it was kind of moving around, and it looked like it finally noticed me, and it just stopped, too. And it seemed like forever I was just staring at it, and you couldn't see a face, but, you know, you could tell, like, the way it was turned, like it was looking at me. And suddenly it just charged at me. I mean, just charged full force, knocked me over, and disappeared into the wall. Well, I had had enough. I was done. I was done with this horrific house that we had dealt with for 20 years, and I was just done. So I just grabbed a few things, and I literally just went in my car, pulled out away from the house, and parked on the street, and that's where I slept. I called my sister to come get me. I said, "Get me," you know. So she came and got me, but that night I sat there and I watched the house, and I watched the lights go on and off all night long. That's what they were doing. The lights in the house were just going on and off, on and off, on and off. So she comes to get me, and I just I didn't care about the house. I didn't care if I went to the bank. I didn't care about anything. So that's exactly what I did. I let it go to the bank, and I didn't care. I was done with it. Well, the people who got that house, they got it for around $15,000, which I'm sure they thought was this great bargain, you know, because they got it in an auction. But then my neighbors down the road told me that those people one night, because she also was a third shifter and it was her night off, and she was outside. She was a smoker, so she was outside smoking a cigarette. She said she heard this commotion, so she got off her porch and she was looking. And she said the people that had bought that house in the middle of the night ran out of that house in their pajamas, just loaded up a few things and left, and the family never came back. The man of the family came back and packed up their stuff and left, and apparently that house is not sold since. It's still on the market. My sister drove by there a few weeks ago and said it's just overgrown with weeds. Like, the weeds have just grown up into the house, into the porch, everything. So this house that used to be this cute little house that had like wagon wheels in the front and flower gardens in the back is just like this dilapidated shack now. Well, when we did some research, we had found out that that house had actually been moved at one point. It used to be in Texas. And sometime during the Dust Bowl, that house got moved to this little town in Oklahoma. And they had added on to it. And supposedly the person who owned that house had committed suicide in the house. And then on top of it, the house next to it, the funeral parlor, that was the funeral parlor for the whole town. That man's body ended up in that house too. So it's like, because like the hauntings in that area didn't just happen in that house. It happened in a few houses around the area. And that little town anyways is just creepy. It's just like a puddle of sadness. You go into that town and it's just like a bummer. You know, that's what somebody described it as once. I drove through there like, oh, that town's a bummer. Because it's just old, and it's just, you know, it's just like a leftover from a different era when the railroad ran through there, and it used to be a booming place. And the oil fields were happening around, and it was they had a roller skating rink, all kinds of stuff in that town, and a movie theater, which now there's nothing there. There's just some old buildings and just some old houses. A couple houses are new. A couple of them were prominent families that made a lot of money, like during the Dust Bowl. You know, their places are still there. For the most part, the town is just dying. And that house, and the one next to it, too, just the weeds are overgrown. Nobody, you know. So I think, this is just my opinion, what I think happened was, I think that the house already had issues, like with a spirit or whatever. And I think people's sickness, negativity, all that stuff kind of formed something else, whether you want to call it a poltergeist or whatever. But I think whatever that is stayed there, and I think it just got stronger over the years. So I'm kind of hoping the house just falls apart and nobody ever moves into it again, because I really think that house kind of ruined a lot of lives. Not just my families, but I think families before that it had ruined their lives too. So, but yeah, so that's the story of the house. I'm going to take a quick break here, and I'm going to come back and tell you a story that happened to me probably about 4.5 years ago with a patient, because I work in the medical field. So give me just a minute here, and I'm going to put on a kooky little song called Regenerate My Pet, or actually The Friendly Monster Shop. We'll go with that one. So y'all enjoy this, and I'll be back in just a minute.
If you need some company,
Hi, and welcome back to Ecto. This is Michelle Auger. This is basically a show about just ghost stories and things like that. And the two that I'm doing tonight are from my personal history. And I'll be either reading other people's stories or have them come on and read their own and tell us about their own. So hopefully you all love this show as much as I think I would love it, because I'm just that kind of weird person. But this next story is about, well, I'm just going to call it the creature or whatever. I have worked in the medical field for almost, well, I guess it's been 19 years now. And most of that I have worked night shift. And and you ask anybody who's worked in the medical field for a long time, you see some strange things. You just do. And I had always seen strange things, and that's just me my whole life. I've heard strange things, I've seen strange things, but but I'm always a logical explanation type of person. If like I heard knocking at night at work, it's like, oh, it's got to be here in the pipes. But there's just some things that happen that you just can't explain, and the story I'm about to tell you is one of them. At the time, I was working in this rehab place, and rehabilitation for like broken hips, whatnot. Well, the nursing home that the building was attached to was actually really full, and hospice needed a place to put a few of their patients. Well, we had gotten one, and for those of you who don't know what hospice is, it's basically just end-of-life care. It's people who are there, they basically know that they're going, and our job is just to keep them as comfortable as possible and do whatever we can for the families to help them. It's, some people don't like it. I think it's a wonderful program. I just think it's a better way to go if you have to, which we all do. We had gotten this guy, and he had come to us. He was he basically took care of himself. We couldn't even believe he was hospice. This man got up, he did everything himself. We really didn't do anything for him for like 4 days, and his family was there day and night. Day and night, they were just so attentive. They loved this man. They took care of him. And like I said, we were just kind of wondering why he was there as hospice, because he did everything himself. He ate regular food. He hardly took any medicine. He didn't need any comfort medicine. It was just kind of strange. So, but hey, we're always grateful for the ones like that, because, but trust me when I tell you, we're stretched thin. So on the 4th day, his daughter had come out and said, "There's something wrong with Dad." So we go in there, and he's just like, out of it. He's looking straight up at the air. He's kind of in a catatonic state, almost like a coma. And she goes to call her parents. The parents come there, and they're like doing like this real weird, like whispering to each other, like, we couldn't understand what they were saying. Well, the family said, well, we're going to go to lunch. Well, they never came back. So he's there, and he's in this coma, and about 2 hours after the family left, these church people show up. Well, these 3 people, it was 2 men and a woman, and they had shown up and said that they were from his church. Well, we can't just let anybody go see the patients. We had to call the family. The family's like, yeah, they're fine. You can tell them anything. So we're, oh, okay. So they stayed there with him, and they took shifts day and night for days. Well, this man was in a coma. They stayed there, and it's like every single day. It's like almost like they forgot what they told us the time before. Oh, he was such a good man. He was such a good man. I wish you could have seen him in the church. He did all these great things, and they would just, the second you got in the room, they were on you. Which is fine, but it's like you're trying to do stuff, and it's like every single time, it's almost like they were on loop or something. He was such a good man. Such a great, I wish you could have seen him in the church. He was so wonderful. And it's just, and we all thought it was kind of strange, and I just kind of looked at him like, what's going on here, Well, one night shift I had worked, it was me, a nurse, and another aide. And they had gone into a room, I don't remember, for something. It was something that took 2 people. Anyways, I was at the desk, and I was there to, make sure if any lights or anything went on that somebody was available. Well, probably about 5-10 minutes into being at the desk by myself, the woman, she come running out of the room. She's like, you need to help him. He's getting up. Also, I was like, getting up? What? So I go in there, and as I'm going in, the 2 men, I don't know where they came from, they came up from behind me, and they're in the room. And them and the two women are like standing up against the side wall beside me, and I'm kind of looking at them really strange because they're like showing no emotion, nothing, just really bizarre. And all of a sudden I look, and I mean the breath was taken out of me because I look, and up on the wall behind his bed where he's grabbing onto the side rail, literally trying to get up, and behind him on the back wall there's this thing. And it wasn't even in front of the wall. It was like part of the wall. It's hard to describe. It was like it was part of the paint. But it was really dark, like almost black. And, I think it was kind of black, you know, but it looked like what people would describe as a Grim Reaper, except for it was almost square-shaped. People laugh when I say this, but it was like SpongeBob. It was like kind of square, and it had like a hooded cloak. And it had these, like, its hands were like claws. And it was just it was huge. It covered most of that wall. And I'm looking at that man, and I'm looking at that thing, and you know, people say, you know, fight or flight kicks in. Well, I don't know why, but I decided to fight. And I had ran over there, and I got between him and this thing on the wall. So this thing's behind me, and the man's in front of me, and I'm trying to hold him, and I'm putting him back in the bed, and I'm telling him, it's okay, you know, it's okay. And I've got him, I hold him, and he kind of looked back at me, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see something move, and this thing is moving along the wall, and it goes up to the head of the bed, the wall there, and it goes around, and I see it like literally become part of his tray table, like it had just like gone into stuff. And it reached out into this man's chest, and he died instantly. It was just like you see in movies and cartoons and all that, you know, it's like it had reached out and touched him, he died like boom, like that. Well, in the meantime, I'm screaming for my nurse. I'm like, you guys get here, hey, you know what I mean, hitting the light and everything. I even pulled the emergency button for the code, you know, which even though he's hospice, you know, we weren't doing a code on him. But as I'm doing that, I look over at these people, and they're just kind of looking at each other. Like, no emotion, nothing. They're just looking at each other. And I was like, what in the hell is going on here, right? So they come in, and they're just like, what happened? I didn't tell her about the creature, but what was weird is she looked scared. So I'm looking at her, like, really weird. Like, what? You know, what the hell? Why are you looking like that? So anyway, she's like, okay, let's just get him in bed, and blah, blah, blah. And she tells these people, okay, step out of the room for a moment. So she does her thing, you know, listen to him with the stethoscope and all that. And of course, she says that he's gone. So we go out, and these people just disappeared. They're gone. And I asked the other girl, I was like, where did they go? She's like, I don't know. They were just there. Maybe they walked off the unit. So I looked. There's nobody around. Okay, so that's even weirder. So the nurse calls because that's how it works. You have to call a hospice nurse, and then they come in and they take care of things. Well, the hospice nurse had come in, and she, of course, pronounces him, and I'm shaking at this time. I'm just like, there's so much that had just happened. I didn't even know how to process it, you know, and I literally had tears welling up my eyes. And they were worried about me because that is not me. I'm the cooler head of the group. I try to be anyways. You know what I mean? It was like if something happens, I try to keep a cooler head and just think, okay, we've got so many other people to take care of. That's what our focus needs to be. You know, but once in a while we all lose it, you know, and I did that day, and I just couldn't take it. And the last thing I heard was the hospice nurse going, what? What? So she gets off the phone, and I hear her tell my nurse that the family doesn't even want to come down. Normally the family wants to come down and see their person for the last time, you know. They didn't want to. She just said they coldly just told her the nurse, the funeral home that he's going to. Like, they didn't even care. But this is a family who had been there for days. While this man was up and awake and laughing and talking and caring and hugging, you know, it was just so bizarre. And she said they just told her, you know, just said, no, we're not coming down. Here's the funeral home number. So at this time, I couldn't take anymore. I was just shaking, and like I said, tears welling up my eyes. And I was a smoker at that time, so I just started walking off the unit. And they're just like, Michelle, what are you doing? I was like, I can't be here. I couldn't even talk. I was like, I can't be here. That's all I kept saying. So I walked down the stairs, and I go out, and at that place we had a smoking area. And I sat there, and I must have been there for about an hour and a half, and I smoked 13 cigarettes. I was so freaked out. Finally, and several people had come out and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And I was like, I can't go back in. I'm not going. No, I'm not going back in." It's like I couldn't even function because I couldn't process what I had saw. And finally, my nurse comes down. She had finally gotten everything done and everybody settled. She's like, "What's going on?" She's like, "I know there's something going on." She had known me for a while, and I finally broke down and told her what I had seen. Well, then she kind of turned like this weird, like, white color, and I was like, "What?" And she's all, when I came into the room, she goes, "Do you remember that?" I said, "Yeah, you look scared." I thought maybe it was because, this guy did. She goes, "No." She goes, "I've been in this business for 25 years. I've seen death, I was like, "Well, what happened?" She said when she was coming to the room, she seen this big black thing come flying out of the room and, like, go up into the ceiling. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And I told her what had happened, and she's like, "Oh my God," so we're both freaking out. She was actually a smoker and quit. She grabbed my cigarette pack and lit up one, because we were both just like insane, So finally we just came to grips and, okay, this happened, and this is something that I had never seen before and have not seen since. I mean, working in this business, you talk to anybody who has did, people have always seen, like, black mists, they've seen white mists, whatever, stuff always happens, but this was just beyond anything. Anyways, we get back on the floor, we still had like an hour left of the shift, and the girl we worked with, she insisted on knowing what we were talking about. What do you know? So we told her, and all of a sudden she's freaked out. "I don't want to be here, this is evil." So she actually clocked out and went home because she was so scared she couldn't even finish the shift. But yeah, it was something that just stayed with me for a long time, and it freaked me out so bad. I just didn't even know, like, what was real or not, because it scared me that bad, because I had never seen anything like that. I mean, I had seen people die, but I've never seen, like, death or whatever just actually come and take somebody. So that was really a strange thing, and it, like I said, to this day, I mean, it does. It still sits with me. Not like it did. I can talk about it now and not shake and cry, but yeah, and I've quit smoking since. But yeah, it was seriously just one of the most bizarre things I think I have ever been through. I've just never had anything like that happen. I've always seen and heard stuff. Like, you work in that type of business, you always see ghosts, you hear things, whatever, but never anything like that. And we still don't know who those people were. We don't know what happened. We don't know if, like, the family made a deal, the guy made a deal. You always think of stuff like that. Maybe these people were there to make sure it happened. I don't know. What if they summoned somebody? We don't know. That nurse and I, we sometimes, I still talk to her on Facebook and stuff because I don't live in that area anymore. But yeah, her and I still talk about it sometimes, and just how freaky it was, that I had seen that. And I honestly don't know what made me go run between him and that thing. It was just, because like a normal person, to me to this day, I probably would run, and I would tell people to run. And I don't know what made me do it. I don't know. But I ran and I got right in that thing was probably about not even a foot from my back. But I got in between him and it, and then I don't know. I just know that man was scared shitless, and that thing came around and touched him, and he died. Like, put his hand in his chest, and he died, and those people were just there. So, yeah, just a strange thing. And I've got a lot of little stories like that from, not quite that bad, but there's just some strange things that happen in these places that I've worked in, and I'll, future episodes we'll talk about those, and I would love to have people on to tell me their experience and their story, and I think it would be great. So this is the premiere of Ecto. Hopefully you all like it, and I'm going to try to run it for about 6 weeks and see how it goes. So thank you for listening, and y'all stay safe and try to stay away from the ghosts. So, and especially little reapers with claws. All right, then we'll talk to you later. Have fun.